Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Megan Henry. And again, I'm joined by Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hi, so excited to be here today.
I'm so excited that you are here. And I'm so excited about our guests because today we're joined by Krista Glenn, and she is the Chief Claims Officer at Westfield Specialty Insurance. And, I shamelessly have followed Krista and her career for many, many years. I met her years and years ago at Claims College when I was a wee baby attorney. And I think she was one of the faculty members at Claims College at the time. And I've just always watched her from afar. And, you connected with her through your posts on LinkedIn, and you guys really just connected. I think you just resonated very well with her. And I was like, have her come on. And she enthusiastically said, yes.
Yeah, she is exactly the kind of person who I aspire to be like and want to be like in the future. I just think she has an amazing career. She's been an amazing mother, mentor, person in claims, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say today.
Yeah. So with that, let's bring her in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.
Good morning, Krista. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you today. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's good to see you both.
We are in the last official week of summer. I'm a little sad to be saying goodbye to summer, as we were just chatting in our pre-podcast chat about Jen's going to Claims College this weekend. We were just talking about how much that causes havoc on our lives to have things right before Labor Day when you just want to soak in those last few minutes or last few days of summer.
Yep, I agree. I know this summer went particularly fast for me. I don't know why. I think they are going faster and faster as the years go by. And I can't believe it's going to be September next week already. But it is what it is. Time marches on.
I know. It makes me so sad. Yesterday, my kids were all they wanted to get fall decorations. I'm like, I'm not ready for this. Mm-hmm. And we watched Hocus Pocus last night. I'm like, I am not ready for Hocus Pocus.
It's going to be 90 here today in Atlanta. So it certainly doesn't feel like it's the end of summer.
No.
It was cool this morning, but I think it is. It's 80 already. It's going to be 91, but I'll take it as long as it'll last.
Yes, me too.
But it's that tug. It's like that I crave the routine of school and the kids being back into that schedule, but I don't want summer to be over. It's just, you kind of get tugged in the middle.
Well, as much as so my children, I have two daughters, and they are 27 and 29, so they are long out of the school and they are out of my house and launched. But I do remember those days where you I want a schedule, but then once you're in the schedule, sometimes that schedule is so hectic that you're like, I'd like the freedom of the vacation. And so you never really know what is better. At least I did.
Yeah, I'm definitely not ready to deal with homework again. That is something I'm not looking forward to.
I know.
Because it's the worst.
I used to say to my kids all the time, I've done the 5th grade already. I'm good.
Yeah. And by the way, they changed it. It's different now.
And back then I couldn't do the math. And also I have found that when my kids particularly were in elementary school, if we went to open house at the school, you could tell the difference between those are projects done by the kids and those are projects done by the parents. And mine were always done by the kids. I don't have any art talent anyway, but I also felt like, no, I'm not doing this. This is for you to do. And but the teachers told me that they could tell too, and it was just fine. So
yeah. I always joke that I married my high school science tutor, and I did because we went to high school together. And that's why now he is in charge of all the science and math homework with the kids. It just transitioned very nicely.
Very good idea.
Yeah, so that's me. Well. Anyway, Krista, I am so happy that you've joined us for this episode. And, we have a lot to talk about. And just for our listeners to know, when we were having our pre-podcast call, I think we were on the phone just chatting for 45 minutes. So, there is a lot. We should have just pressed record on that phone call. We could have gone on forever. But, Chris, I've been, not to sound like a creeper, but I've been like kind of following you for a long time, because I think we met briefly at Claims College. I think in like 10 years ago, I went to Claims
Yeah.
College. And I've always just been keeping an eye on like your career progression. I mean, at that point, I think you were already pretty high up in your career anyway, but
Gosh,
you have a fan in me.
Thank you. And the feeling is mutual for both of you.
But, I'm always very interested to hear, though, like how you got to where you are, because, you are a lawyer by trade, but I don't believe were you ever in private practice?
No, and I didn't intend to be either. I'm one of those people that went to law school because I was not ready to really be a grown up. And graduate school seemed like a great way to delay that inevitable. However, I will tell you that once I got to law school, I pretty much immediately didn't like it. However, we're not quitters in our family. And so I decided I started it, I'll finish it. And I wound up going to school in the summer. Like I went to Delaware Law School, now it's called Delaware, and they had summer classes. I took classes in the summer, and I graduated in December rather than the following May. So I graduated a little bit early, and was thinking I would go into criminal law. I had worked at the DA's office in Philly and the Defenders Association of Philly, and I loved that. I thought that's what I do. But their programs start after you graduate in May, take the bar in July, and they start in August. So I had this big gap from ending in December through August to fill. And my sister-in-law worked at AIG in New York at the time. And after I took the bar in February, she helped me to get a job there. I did not know what AIG was when she called me. She had to tell me. I did not know what she did. I think my response when she told me what she did, working in an insurance claim department, was like, doesn't sound that interesting. Nonetheless, I did not have a job or health insurance, which she pointed out to me, and therefore I needed the gig. And so I went and took the job thinking I would do it for a few months and then maybe quit and go work at the DA's office. And more than 30 years later, I'm still here in insurance. So I don't think anybody, particularly in my age group, ever intended to be in insurance. We all kind of fell into it. So I fell into it because my sister-in-law got a referral bonus. We got a lot of people jobs in the claim department at AIG at the time. So here I am all these years later because of that.
So when you started at AIG, what types of claims were you handling at that point?
Environmental. So the long-term, like CERCLA, RECRA, long-term pollution, which in the 90s when I started there was big, right? It was a thing. And so I think my career has very often followed that thing that's in the paper, right? So in the 90s, all of that environmental litigation was very much in the zeitgeist if you followed anything to do with litigation or insurance. So I worked in Manhattan in the 80 Pine Street office at AIG and lived in South Jersey at the time. So it was a 3-hour each direction commute.
Yeah.
So I am the last person that ever had sympathy for anybody's terrible commutes. Although here in Atlanta, I can sympathize with some people because some people's commutes are really bad. But commuted and did that for a while. Then I moved to Bucks County, and it was still like a 2-hour commute. But I really found it interesting. So I did not know anything about insurance. I did not know anything about environmental law in particular. But a lot of people they were hiring were just like me, people out of law school, no experience, and they trained us up and did a pretty good job of it. Like trial by fire a bit. I remember my boss, the first day I started, gave me a stapled couple of pieces of paper and said, here, this is your pending. Start working through and let me know if you have questions. And she walked away, and I sat at my desk for a few minutes, and I got back up and I walked around to her cube. She looked at me like, oh my God, it's been 2 minutes. What and I said to her, what is a pending? I had no idea.
It's a valid question.
Yeah, I did not know what that meant. And she was like, it's the stuff you're responsible for. Go to the mailroom, show them that list, and tell them you want to look at stuff. And I was like, okay. So you just kind of jumped in and, started going through files and asking questions. And it was really interesting. And the pay was good for the time, and just kind of kept moving. And I liked it. It was interesting. And it was a good group of people, a lot of people my age at the time that were all starting around the same time. And some of those people I'm still in touch with today and are in, high positions at other companies. So it's kind of interesting to see where we all went.
Yeah, I do feel like that trial by fire approach was something. I mean, that's what I experienced. So too, it was like, you just got put on your desk, like, okay, answer this discovery. I'm like, E&S Discovery. I
That's
don't
all I
even
do,
like
yeah.
what do I do? I remember going to, someone else's office who I'm like, okay, she looks friendly. And I was like, I'm supposed to answer this discovery. What am I supposed to do? And she taught me how to do it because I was too embarrassed to go to the partner's office and, and
Yeah.
announce that I had no idea what I was doing. But why would I know what I was doing? I literally had just
Mm-mm.
started being a lawyer.
Well, and law school teaches you nothing. You don't learn really
No.
practical skills. I mean, you learn how to think or reason or write, but you don't really learn practical skills on how to do anything. So you have to come out. I think back when I started too, you have to consider no internet. So there was no easy, like, let me Google something. You had to ask people. You had to go to a law library. You had to look things up in a book. And the thing that I think has benefited me, it benefits me now, is that I'm not afraid to say I don't know something and to ask the question. And a lot of times I think people who are newer to the career, they, like you said, you get intimidated. You don't know who to ask or when to ask or who's okay to ask and who isn't okay to ask and who's going to help you and who isn't. And I found early in my career, and a lot of us were doing this. If you don't, I mean, the internet did not really exist. There was no such thing. So if I didn't know something, if I didn't ask, I would never know.
Yeah.
And I found even most lawyers I worked with at the time, and once in a while I would get kind of a weird response, but more often than not, if I asked and said, I don't know what that is, they would tell me. And I think that, that's kind of what we should do for each other. To your point, when you see somebody that looks friendly, it's because that person should help to give back. We have a obligation to help train somebody new because somebody helped train us all those years ago.
Yeah. Now, did you have anyone who kind of stepped in to be like your in a mentor type role at that stage, or did that happen later on?
Yeah, I
Or
would say
never?
that happened. Not really at AIG. I mean, that was kind of a chaotic, crazy work environment. I learned a lot, but it was not really that kind of environment. When I went to, I left AIG a couple years later and went to Cigna, and in their environmental department where I handled more asbestos and toxic tort claims. And when I got there, there was a person who was very high up in the organization and was like leading what was called Brandywine claims, runoff claims, asbestos, environmental, toxic tort. And the person who was running that group was a man named Mike Daly. And I always really liked him very much. I felt like he was tough but fair, which was a little bit his motto at the time. But I felt like I learned something every time I was in his presence. And I wouldn't say that he was instantly a mentor to me, but he is certainly a mentor to me now. He left after a little while. We stayed in touch. He actually came and worked with me at my prior company for a while to help me out. So we stayed in touch all these years ever since, I think I transferred to Cigna. Oh, I know. It was 1995. It was right after my daughter was born. So from that time till now, he's probably been the key mentor in my life. But there have been other people that have been really important in my career. Trish Henry, who was in many roles at the ACE companies, but was a general counsel role for a while. She is a person, and in the way I define a mentor is somebody who will not only help you, but will speak the truth to you when you need to hear it, even if you don't want to. Trish Henry, many times in my career, said something to me that maybe I didn't want to hear, but I needed to hear. And that to me really demonstrated that she truly did care about me. Even if at the time I was like, I didn't like what she was saying. I probably needed to hear what she was saying. And so I said, I think people like along the way have been very helpful and important in my career. But it wasn't an intentional thing where I was looking for it. It just kind of happened naturally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how the best mentorships do happen. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard, like, will you be my mentor? Like, I feel like that's not an organic approach. Like, you think people just kind of step into the roles and you don't even know. I don't think anyone really knows they're doing it really at the time. It's like later when you look back at it, you're like, oh, that person really played like a pivotal role in my career progression. And,
Right.
but I think that's where the best mentors are. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a very organic and natural thing.
Well, and they have to be able to tell you those things that you need to hear but don't want to. And I think that's
Yes.
hard, right? Sometimes it's the easier path is to just be very supportive and encouraging and to do all those good things. But it's those people who also tell you like, this, you could do better, or, have you ever thought about this? Because that's not working. And to really to say that to you directly is so helpful. And I would say both Mike and Trish very much did that for me, which was important. But I feel like I've taken a lot from a lot of people I've worked with. There are a lot of great coverage attorneys and defense attorneys that I've gotten to know well. And, I feel like I'm just willing to like suck great things out of people as often as I can. And so there's been so many people in my career that I've just had the absolute pleasure to work with and benefit to work with. It has been so important.
Yeah. And have you found that you've taken on that role for others throughout your career?
I've tried to. I mean, there are definitely a couple of people. I think that I've done it for a number of working moms.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like at some point when I was younger and my kids were younger, I was just like, what am I doing? I am like trying to be all things to all people all the time. I can't do it. I'm going to go either insane or off the deep end, one or both. And I just started to try to say, like, can I cut myself a little bit of a break? And I realized at some point I couldn't be both the best mom I wanted to be and the best employee I wanted to be at the same time. And I've said this 1,000 times. Some days I am just a kick-ass rock star employee. I am killing it. And my family is like, where are you? Where have you been? Like, we need you. You're absent. And then other times I am just killing it as a mom, and maybe I'm not killing it at work. And what I realized was that's okay. And I knew my priorities always were my kids, right? So no matter what that meant, if that meant I was staying home because they were sick, even if that was going to cause like a problem at work, well, I was staying home because they were sick, and that was what it was going to be, and I decided that if I had come to this realization of not trying to drive myself crazy by doing all things all the time, that I would try to help other women to realize the same. Like, don't do that to yourself. I feel like there's an expression, if you want something done, give it to a working mom, because we prioritize, get it done. No nonsense, just, move forward. But we also, I think, are very hard on ourselves. And so I've tried with particularly other working moms and some working dads too, to be like, look, you've got to do what you have to do today. You can't do everything every day. Don't try. You're going to make yourself insane. Just work hard at all things all the time, because that's important to work hard, but don't try to be, 100% of 100% of the days, 100% of the time. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So I've tried, particularly around that issue, because I've seen a lot of younger women just like struggling to do it all. And I've tried to step in and say, don't, you're really good at your job and you're a really good mom, and don't try to make yourself crazy.
Well, and I don't want to skip too far ahead in your story, but I think that's why it's so important for us to see someone like you who has continued to advance and grow in your career even after your children left. Because sometimes, like Megan and I are in the thick of it, right? Like we have elementary school kids, middle school kids, we're their chauffeurs. We're really, that's our role right now. And you think like, well, what am I doing? Like, am I spinning my wheels every day for what? And then I look to somebody like you and say, oh, because I'm going to raise them, and then they're going to hopefully be productive members of society and grown.
Right.
And hopefully.
Yeah.
And then there is more. There is that ability then to grow your career. Like, you just got to keep on keeping on. And the time will come.
Well, and I will say this, at the very beginning of my career, and I wouldn't give this as advice to everybody, but it's just the reality. At the beginning of my career, I was very heads down at my desk and doing my job, and then leaving to catch the train to get home to pick my kids up from daycare. There was not a lot of me picking my head up and networking and meeting the right people, going to the right events. I just did not have time for that. I very much was, let me do the best job I can do every day at work, but then I got to leave to catch the train to get home. And so would I progress a little bit more quickly if I lifted my head up a little sooner? I might have, but I also don't know that I had any bandwidth to do that.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. I mean, my husband is a lawyer, and he was an associate at the time. So that's all about FaceTime and in the office. And he used to drop the kids off in the morning, and I picked them up at the end of the day. And we were doing the best we could, but I just didn't have any real capacity for all of the networking and other things that you should do to grow your career. But at a point where I did, and I picked my head up, things started happening. I mean, there was a time where there were people who were getting jobs that maybe I wanted, and I thought, why are they getting it and I'm not? And but then once I started to kind of put myself forward and pick my head up a little bit and get involved in things started to happen for me. and I will say, I think we said this during our prep call, I never intended not to work. I mean, if I hit the lottery, maybe I would stop working, but I would need something else to do. So I always knew that I would work. At the beginning of my career, I had to work. We had bills to pay and student loans and health insurance needs and things like that. But I don't know that I ever stopped and thought, like, what was the point where I could have stopped working. I just never intended to stop working, and I don't apologize for it. And, I have 2 daughters that work, and I would say the same thing. Like, it's going to be hard when they're little, and when all of your conversations with your spouse are about who's picking up whom and at what time, and like all of that stuff. Like, that's hard, but it's worth doing in my mind. And I didn't go all the way through school and put myself through law school to not be in the workforce. That was just not my plan. So I always knew I'd work. And to your point, Jen, I mean, I don't know what I would have done then once the kids are gone if I hadn't been working. What would I do then? So just not. And I don't begrudge anybody who is a stay-at-home mom, who wants to be a stay-at-home mom. I think that's a super, super hard job that I knew I couldn't do. So not my thing.
I always thought it was easier because I tried to stay home for a little while. And when I went back to work, you almost breathe a sigh of relief when you sit down at a desk with a cup of coffee and you think, hey, I can drink hot coffee. I can, being a stay-at-home mom is, I think, the hardest job out there.
Yeah. It's really hard. And it wasn't something that would fit me. I just couldn't see myself doing it and being happy. And so I think even though there were days where my kids, I'm sure, would have been happy to have me home after school or to not have to be, at a daycare or babysitter. I think now as adults, they understand, are largely doing the same thing I did, anyway. So it makes sense to them now, even if at the time it didn't always make sense, but that's okay too. They'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, like I was just saying to my youngest daughter today, because, it's the last pretty much week of summer. And I even said to her, I'm like, I'm going to miss you being home, like in the morning and just hanging out while I'm working. Some days I don't agree with that. Some days I'm like, get out of my hair, but it is kind of nice to have the slower morning that like they are just kind of like she's doing whatever on her iPad while I'm on my computer and she's just sitting next to me. I'm like, it's nice not to have to rush her out. But then around 2:00 when they're, screaming at each other and pulling each other's hair. And I'm like,
I know, right?
I have a different viewpoint on that.
And at what point of your career was it that you sort of were able to pick your head up a little bit and to look around? Was it still when you were at Cigna or was it?
I joined Cigna in 95 and then ACE bought Cigna in 99. So like say 99, 2000, it started with me kind of doing things within the department. So at some point, I'm a bit of, like I'm sure you two are. I'm a bit of an insurance nerd and a claims nerd. So I was reading things. There was a magazine that was published, and I don't even know if it's published anymore, called Neely's, and it had like summaries of all the case law. Right? Again, this is all kind of pre-internet, pre-Google search days. So I would read all that, and I'd be like, "Ooh, this is so interesting. Do you know about this? Do you know about this?" And people, who sat near me, and they'd be like, "No, what?" Like they couldn't be bothered. So I with a couple of other people said, let's do like a newsletter where we take all this stuff that's out there and like summarize it onto a page because people might read a page. So I started to do that with a couple of people in the department, but I was kind of very much the leader. I was a journalism major, so I kind of felt like that was back to my journalism roots a little bit. So I did that. And then I also did a lot of volunteering for whatever else was going on. So if there was something that needed to be done that nobody seemed to want to do, I was like, I'll do it. Because what do I care? I'm getting paid from X to Y every day. So what I do in that interim, whatever, as long as it's defined by somebody as my job, it could be not a claim file or not, it could be a project. I'd volunteer to organize things. I'd volunteer to put, information together for the people that were in leadership. So I volunteer for a lot of stuff. So I think that's when it's really started, when I started to kind of become that person in the department that they would go to for things. And I felt like it was something a little different than just claim file handling. And it was something that was interesting, and it got me some exposure to people that were in management and made the day interesting. So I think it started then when I started to say, like, volunteer. I told our trainees this summer, I always tell trainees, put your hand up and say, I'll do it. Especially if everybody else in the room is kind of diverting their eyes and they don't want to. Be the one who says, I'll do it. Because that benefited me so much in my career. I said that when when the tobacco litigation was starting. It was a new thing that nobody had really, seen or heard of. And they needed somebody who wanted to like organize it for the department. And I was like, I'll do it. So I wound up handling most of this tobacco litigation for the company. And then the gun litigation rolled around and I was like, I'll do that too. And I handled most of those. And those were really high profile pieces of litigation. And I wasn't doing it for the attention as much as I was doing it because it looked interesting and it was a little different.
Right.
And so that's kind of when I think it started happening.
And that is the beauty of not having a billable hour.
Yeah.
That you can do something else in the confines of your 8 to 5 and study for it and still find it interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
exactly.
But it also makes you stand out as someone who isn't just putting their head down and doing the things within your job description, so to speak. Like you're willing to kind of step outside the box and expand and offer other things of value. And I think that's when you start to stand out to, people in higher management and be like, oh, well, look at Chris. Like they might not even know your name if you didn't volunteer. Some of the other folks who just put their heads down, they're just another, claims handler, and they could just, fall into the mix by putting yourself out there. Like, oh, okay, like Krista's serious. Like she's feeling like she's serious about this job and her career, and and is doing all these extra things that add value.
Well, and there was a time too. One of the things I will say that I love about claims is I love the puzzle of it. Right. So a claim comes to you and there's a problem that somebody's having, there's an issue, whatever. Can you make it a little bit better? Can you fix it? That's something that really resonates with me about claims. And so for a while, even as a claim handler, my managers got to know if there was a claim that was particularly messed up. If they gave it to me, I would do my best to make it better. Sometimes I could fix it and sometimes I could just make it incrementally better, but at least that was something that I liked to do. Whereas other people didn't like that so much. They liked the kind of routine of it. Whereas I was like, oh, this is messed up. Or, somebody left the company and they went through a bunch of files and they were like, uh-oh. They would like, hey, could you take these? I'd be like, sure. Or somebody did a presentation, didn't go that well. Like, give it to Krista. She'll take it. It's a mess. She loves the mess. And so I really liked that too. So I would take that on. Like if something was particularly messed up, the way I looked at it was not a lot of risk to me, right? It was already messed up. So if I made it just a little better, good. If I made it a lot better, better. But I couldn't really make it worse. So I like that part of it. And I always felt too, the thing that is great about claims is you can become an expert in all kinds of goofy, weird things if you choose to be, right? Like when I was handling asbestos litigation, I think the asbestos medicine was so interesting to me. I spent so much time reading about it and being really interested in it that at one point I was doing authority for most of the people in the department, even though I wasn't a manager. People would have to come to me to get like the medical part cleared before they could go and get financial authority from our boss, because he knew I knew the medicine so well that if I said, yeah, this is good, like he wouldn't have to worry about that. And so I didn't get paid extra for that. I didn't get title for that. I didn't get anything for it. But my boss recognized like she knows this stuff. And that was to me like kind of point of pride. That was good.
I always found it the same, the puzzle making. I am convinced that everyone who loved the logic games on the LSATs are people who love claims, because like, that was my favorite part. Like sometimes if I get 2 or 3 claims in a day, I'd be like, that's okay. This is the best part. Like I get to dive in and like what's going on. And it's very weird, but it's always nice to find like-minded people who love weird claims.
And are you the kind of person that like those LinkedIn games that they have up there now? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do this. Like, I
didn't even know there were such games on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, they take like a minute. I mean, they're literally like 45-second things. I do it while I'm eating my breakfast in the morning. Any of that kind of puzzles and games, I really like that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why claims is good for me, because that's the kind of thing I like.
Yeah, I do remember the logic games on the LSAT was like it felt like fun. I was like, this is
Yeah.
I didn't like reading comprehension so much. That wasn't as fun, but logic games, love it.
Yeah.
And it makes me an expert at carpool. So they make me do the carpool for dance every year. There's like, okay, there's 5 kids and 3 of them take this class and only 2 of them take this class. And I make a spreadsheet and I decide who's driving. It's so much fun.
My kids have made fun of me forever because we never went on a vacation, that there wasn't a spreadsheet involved, and like where we were going to be at what time and what place and who was going to be where. And all. That's the way my brain works. And yeah, so all of that to me is just some kind of a logic puzzle that I need to organize. And that's largely what I like about it. I mean, really, I think you meet fascinating people and you learn about subjects that are largely, things that are in the news all the time, and I think that's all interesting as well. But I like the fixing of something.
Yeah.
I did that a lot as a manager too. Like I have a team that wasn't performing well. I'm like, can I just make them incrementally better? Can I get their audit scores up just a little bit? And not trying to take everybody from 0 to 60, but like, can I just get just a little bit better, just a little bit better? And this is a good career for people who have that kind of a mentality, right?
Progress, not perfection. That is my motto of parenthood, actually.
Every day, let's just try to be a little bit better than we were yesterday.
Yeah.
And then some days you're not.
Yeah, it's okay too. Try again tomorrow.
So, but at some point though, you made the jump to the chief claims officer position, and like walk us through that, because I mean that is like just like a huge career accomplishment. It's kind of like I remember when I made partner, I was like, okay, this is the last promotion I'll ever get.
That's it. Done now.
But
wrap it up.
I was like, okay, I've done it all now. But it's I mean, that is just huge, and there's only so many of those positions out there. So talk to us a little bit about how that went for you.
So I was at Cigna, which became Chubb, for more than 21 years. So it's a long time. And I've told the story 1,000 times too. I was sitting at my desk one day. I got a call from a recruiter, which you always get calls from recruiters when you're not looking for a job. When you're looking for one, the calls start coming. But when you're not looking, the calls are just all day, every day. And I had spent a long time just saying like, I'm good, thanks. I'm good, thanks. I'm good, thanks. And, not paying attention. I don't know what it was about that particular day. If I was having a really good day or a really bad day or what it was, but a recruiter called me and she started to talk to me about a chief claim officer job at a company I'd never heard of. And, I just said, sure. Like I hadn't interviewed in 2 decades. I didn't even know if I was any good at it anymore. Like, let me just go on an interview just to see how interviews go. It's been so long. So I largely just on a flyer decided to go on this interview. And what I realized in going through the process was this was the opportunity for me to get that title and have that responsibility. And this is nothing negative to the Chubb companies, but I did not think I would ever have that opportunity at that company. It was just not the role for me that they saw for me. And that's a very big job. And so I was like, I would never get that here. So if I'm going to get that role, and it's not, I mean, the title is nice, don't get me wrong, but it's about kind of having that ultimate responsibility and being the person making the decisions. If I'm ever going to be in that role, I'm going to have to go somewhere else to do it.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, I got that job and I moved to North Carolina, and the role was what we were talking about. It was very much pitched to me as the place is a bit of a mess. The claim department really needs an overhaul. We need somebody who has like those transformation skills and that, likes to fix things. And I'm like, well, that's what I do. So I took that on and did a lot there. To change that claim department, how it ran, everything from new best practices to new process improvements, to new people, to new structure, to new everything. So really transformed that over about 5 years that I was there. And then was ready to move on and just felt like I had done what I could do there and wanted to do something different. And that's when this chief claim officer job at Westfield Specialty came open. And what I really liked about this opportunity was it was very different from what I had done before. So all those other things that I had done were all about kind of fixing and improving and taking something that was maybe not where it needed to be and trying to get it where it needed to be. This was build a claim department from the ground up. I was claims employee number 1. It was me and an Excel spreadsheet on day 1. And I thought that's something I've not really done, right? I've done a lot of fixing, a lot of changing, and a lot of growing, but I've never done a build from the bottom up. And I really wanted to do it. It just sounded really fantastic. And Jack Kuhn, who is my boss, has a fantastic reputation. I had known about him for a long time, but I'd never worked with him before. And I thought I could learn a lot from him. I'd like to work for him. Like, he's a good person to work for. So this seemed like a terrific opportunity to do something I hadn't done before, but I felt like I had skills that would help me to be successful, right? So, so I started here November of 2021, and I'll be 3 years this November, and we've gone from Krista and her Excel spreadsheet, to, which is what it was. The very first day that I was working here, I got a call from somebody, and I wish I could remember who it was, but it was literally my first day. And the person said, "Krista, we have a claim." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "What do we do?" And I said, "I don't know. I've been here 2 hours." Like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So they did. They sent it to me, and I thought, "Oh, I guess I'm gonna start an Excel spreadsheet," because we didn't have a claim system or anything. And so from one person in an Excel spreadsheet, here we are, less than 3 years later. It's 25 people in the claim department. We fully built out the Guidewire claim system. And it's fantastic. So we have our own claim system that we built from the ground up. We built everything: best practices, processes, the structure of the teams. I've hired all the people, they've hired other people. So it's really tremendous what has happened in a pretty short period of time to go from nothing to something and to something pretty great too. I mean, I could not be happier with the people that I get to work with every day. Fantastic group of people, some of whom I knew before from prior roles and some of whom I didn't, which I think is a nice blend too. It's not all just people I knew. It's a good mix of new and old. And it's been an amazing opportunity. So that's kind of how I got into it. I think like taking that leap from Chubb, where I probably could have stayed and retired, to go to a company I had never heard of in my life and nobody that I knew had heard of either. There are thousands of small insurance companies out there that when you work for one of the large carriers, you don't even know about. They don't, but you have no reason to, right? So, to do that was kind of a crazy leap, but my oldest was, I think, in grad school. My youngest was, I think she was a sophomore in college. So it wasn't like I had to pick up and move kids when they were in school. I can tell you for certain I would have never done that. So if they had called me when those kids were in high school, I wouldn't have moved away from them and I wouldn't have asked them to move. So it was a lot about the opportunity that I wanted, but also timing was important, because I wouldn't have done it when they were younger.
Yeah, they would have been very upset with you.
Oh,
Had you be like, "Oh yeah, okay, you're in high school. We're going to move you to a new high school in a different state in the South."
People that have to do it because, there's a one income family and that income is going to make you move, and that their family, I mean, people are, Army brats who've moved around. There are people whose parents have moved a lot and that's kind of their life and they get it. But my kids had lived in the same house since they were 2 and 4. They had gone to the same school district from kindergarten all the way up. No way, if I had gotten the call a couple years earlier, would I have even considered it. And my husband was great too. Like, he kind of commuted from Pennsylvania to North Carolina for a while until he was able to make the move down permanently after Rachel graduated from college. So, if I didn't have the support of my kids and the support of my husband, I couldn't have done it. And that man, God love him, has now moved here to Georgia with me. Like, we're all over the place. So, I mean,
were your kids though? Did they still get upset though when you sold your home?
You know what?
Because I was upset when my mom sold my childhood home.
Yeah, I don't know. It was my older daughter really didn't have any intentions at the time to come back to the Philadelphia area. I think she was living in Virginia when we were selling the house. She wasn't going to go back. And my younger daughter didn't have any intention to go back. Like, she more looked at it like an adventure. Like, oh, we can do Thanksgiving in North Carolina. Cool. Like, we can go here. So she didn't really, it didn't bother either one of them. I could see why it would bother some people, but it didn't really seem to bug either one of them. And we still see them all the time. I mean, fortunately for us now, they both also live in the South. I have one in Charlotte, one in Huntsville, Alabama. So they're closer to us. If they were in the Northeast and we were down here or vice versa, it would be harder, I think. But we've all kind of migrated south. And so it's kind of worked.
And have you been handling the same or working with the same type of claims all the way through? I know you talked a little bit about how you went from environmental and then asbestos, tobacco. It kind of went along, but what kind of stuff are you doing now?
So I did all that runoff, tobacco, asbestos, environmental, all that until the early 2000s when I switched over from the runoff organization within ACE to the active claim organization within ACE. And so that's when I got into the, everyday GL, auto, that kind of stuff, right? So the slip and falls and the product liability and all that in the more non-runoff environment. Did that for a while. Then I was able to get involved in the foreign casualty claims. So they were U.S. insureds that had losses overseas. They were really interesting. And we also, that team also handled the foreign insureds that had losses in the U.S., which we called reverse flow. So got involved in like the multinational claims for a while. And then eventually at ACE became the head of multinational claims for ACE. And if you're going to do claims, if you can at some point do multinational or international claims, it's fascinating. It's just so interesting because, we're all used to the litigation system here in the US, but to have to deal with a claim in Japan or Germany or in Africa, it's a totally different world. And it's so interesting. So I did that for a while and I really very much enjoyed it. That's where I ended my career at ACE, I was in the multinational space. The small carrier I was at in North Carolina, they did homeowners and some trucking and a moving and storage business and all other kinds of stuff that I'd done auto, I'd done trucking, I've done the GL stuff, but I hadn't done, those particular kinds of things. I hadn't had any homeowners experience prior to that job. So I did that for a little while. I will say what I prefer is commercial. And I really like the specialty commercial, which is where I am now. I've had homeowners claims, and it is important to have a really good homeowners claims rep who helps you through that process. I've had that personally happen to me, and it's really important. It's a very important job. It's just not my favorite, I would say.
Yeah.
And now here where I am in specialty, Westfield Specialty, we have E&S Property group, so commercial property. We have an excess casualty group, which I would say casualty is my strength of all the different claim types. That's definitely my strength. But we also have a financial lines group that has management liability, D&O, EPL, E&O. We have a cyber and professions team. So we have that and environmental. So I'm back kind of full circle to the environmental again. And I'm missing somebody. Property, excess casualty, financial lines, cyber, E&O, and professions, environmental. No, that's it. I haven't. I don't want to miss somebody and have them be upset that I forgot them.
And I find that that's one of the interesting thing about doing claims too, is that you can pivot or to kind of jump to another line because the underlying, like the coverage and all that, is very similar. And so it's easy to learn. Whereas when you are on the practicing side, it's so hard would be huge to make a jump from one to the other. I mean, some are kind of an easy slide, but sometimes it's just, I tried to practice like family and criminal law for a couple of years, and I was going right back to the beginning. And after I was like, no, forget it. I'm going back to the world in which I'm comfortable. Right. But it keeps things interesting when you can kind of make those moves and pivots internally.
Well, and if you think about claims, right, every single claim that is or ever was has the same trajectory. The claim gets noticed, you handle it, and you resolve it. It's the handling part where it's different among the different lines. And so what I think has worked for me is, casualty, like I said, is my strength. I know that fairly well. Property, based on my prior employer, I feel like pretty comfortable there as well. Like I feel like I'm good in that space. I will not ever claim to be the D&O expert in the room. I'm just not. I have a person who works for me, Ari Magadoff, who knows that space like back of his hand, and he is the expert, right? Sarah Trokin is our cyber and professions person. There's nobody better at cyber than Sarah. Like, I'm not going to try to say I'm the expert in those rooms. My job is to make sure that they get the resources they need, that they have what they need to get the job done, that I can help to move it along through the process. But I'm not trying to be an expert in everything, but I think that's another thing about claims. It's fascinating to me what I have learned working beside them for the last couple of years about those lines of business that I didn't know a ton about prior to being here. Yeah. So that's, something that's really great too, is I think it's also important, quite frankly, not to try to pretend you know it all, because people who do know it will suss you out in 5 minutes, right? Like, if I tried to pretend I was the D&O expert in the room, Ari would put that to bed in 2 seconds. So don't try to do that. But, my job is to help him. Like, how can I help him? What does he need? How can I move it along and not to get in his way? Right. So that's another thing that I agree with you. I think if you were trying to do all that different stuff on the lawyer side, it'd be really hard, if not impossible. But it's, if you're in claims and you're really comfortable in the casualty world and somebody gives you the opportunity to go to property, I would encourage people to say yes.
Yeah.
It does take the opportunity, because if you stay in your same lane, you could have a really great career. You absolutely can. But if you are willing to learn other things, that's where you can really expand.
Yeah, I spent 5 years doing financial lines, so like EPL, D&O, fiduciary, and a job came up in GL, and I went over, and everybody was like, it was right after the Chubb ACE merger.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I went over kind of like to the ACE side of the house, and everyone's like, what are you doing? Why would you ever do that? And it was such a good experience, because you just learned a whole different skill set, really, more than anything else.
Well, and even though the path is always the same, what happens in that middle part and that investigation part is so different, that to understand different lines and to have some experience in different lines does nothing more than provide you with additional opportunities. So, I've said to a couple of people that I feel like if you want to have a chief claim officer job, you have to at least understand property.
Yeah.
It may not be your primary, but it would be difficult to go into that and have no idea what's going on. Right. So, when I was at ACE and Multinational, part of my responsibility was working with the Canadian Claim Organization. So there was some property up there that I didn't even realize at the time, like, oh, okay, well, I'm just figuring it out as I go along. Oh, it's good that I know this, because then when I make the leap to the chief claim officer job, I kind of understand the lingo. I understand, what's important. I had learned things through doing a little bit of that work that helped me in other jobs. And so never say no to an opportunity to learn something, I think.
Right. And you don't have to be an expert at it. You kind of just have to be familiar, so you can speak the language. And then you also can rely on the people who are the experts. And you have those people, you work with those people, and you have them in charge of that department. But you also need to know some of it.
You have to know how to ask the right questions, right? Like you have to know the lingo, like you said, and there's plenty of ways nowadays too to educate yourself. I mean, there are so many good resources for learning about a topic that you don't know, that shame on you if you're not doing it, right? It takes time. But there isn't anything you can't look up nowadays. But also, just like I said, don't try to be that person who's the expert in every room, because it's just the people who are the experts are going to be like, nope, she's a pretender. You don't need that. It's not going to work out.
Yeah. And then you lose credibility, right? Because and they're not going to believe anything you say if you're always like, I know everything about this, then they're going to think you know nothing about anything. So
I've said this many, many times, but like, if I'm the smartest girl in the room, let's all go find a better room. Let's find a room where everybody can learn. I mean, because honestly, like, I want to learn too. And if I'm the smartest one in the room, then I'm not learning anything. Let's go find a room where I can learn something too. So I just, I don't know. I don't know what it is that I don't mind admitting I don't know something. I just do, because when somebody's pretending, and I don't want to be that person, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But also it's okay to say you don't know something, but you also have to be willing to figure it out and learn it too. I say this to my kids all the time. Like, I'm sure you remember this, and Jen, you probably experienced this. Like, they ask some asinine questions when you're driving.
Right.
And I never know. And I'm going piggybacking off a post Jen had recently about her son. But like, I never know the answer, or I'm driving, so I can't find the answer. And my response is always like, I don't know. You have a phone, look it up. Let me know. Let me know what you figure out. Like I'm not going to pretend that, because if I'm going to answer your question right now, I'm going to just make something up because I'm driving. I have no resources available to me, but you do have a resource. Right. And it's so hard now to I have to teach them, like, you can look this up and figure it out yourself. Like, you need to learn how to do this. Like, it's good to ask questions, of course, but like, I'm the first to admit that I have no idea the answer to that question. So figure it out.
And like, intellectual curiosity is a life skill too, right? Yes. So not only having a question, but running down the answer to that question is a good life skill that you can do when you're 8. That'll take you through to when you're 80, right? And certainly carry you through at work. So I've said to people, I don't care if you come and ask me a question. I would like you to have a proposed answer. So, this is the problem, and this is what I think we should do, and blah, 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 blah. And then I might say, nope, let's do something else. But I would rather that conversation than the what do we do? This is the problem. You solve it. Like, do the work.
The joke in my house, though, is that I won't make a complaint without proposing a solution, and I've ended up on 4 boards.
There you go. That'll teach you.
So I just have to shut up.
Well, but that's the thing, though, right? That's the way to do it. Is if you are going to your boss or even a peer with like, this is the problem, at least have thought it through a little bit, right? At least have thought through. And 9 times out of 10, when somebody has come to me with that of this is the problem, this is what I think we should do, I've said, sounds good, let's do that. And very rarely do I have the like, no, we're going to do something different. I think most people, if they think it through, they get to the right place. But don't be that person where you're like, I don't know what to do. Here's the problem.
Yeah.
And
those people are frustrating. They're generally not my go-to because it just shows a lack of initiative. And I mean, I think some of it is confidence too, though. If you don't have the confidence that what you find is going to be right, and I don't care if it's right. I just care that if you've made an effort to try to figure it out. And sometimes, sometimes we all need to come together and have different ideas and we'll figure out a solution together, but at least like have something on the table versus, I don't know.
Just demonstrate that you thought it through a little bit, right? That you're not just kind of complaining, but saying like, look, this is the problem. This is the proposed solution, and demonstrate that you've thought it through. And that gets you 90% of the way there. I had somebody who was coming to me and complaining a lot about different things that were going wrong. And I was trying to help with the solution all the time. And at one point, probably was doing the same thing to my boss and complaining about this person who was complaining to me. And he said, if you keep listening, he'll keep talking. And at first I didn't know what that meant. But the next time the person came and was complaining, I said, well, do you want me to solve your problem for you? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. So first you have to go downstairs to HR and tell them to give me your salary today because I'm doing your job. And he was like, and he kind of gave me a funny look. And I was like, so I'm willing to do your job today, but I just want to get paid for it. That seems fair. So go down to HR, tell them I get your salary for today. And, you can do nothing. And then tomorrow we can try again. And he looked at me and he said something like, you're the worst. And I was like, okay. Skedaddled off and figured out the answer and came back later. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I said, there you go. But that was partly my problem. Like I was allowing that to happen, right? Like I'm listening and trying to help. And the person was very, very capable and was able to come up with a solution on their own if I just said to them, no, you figure it out. So that was
I think part of that is like, at least for me, part of that is like, it's like the mother part, that we're always like I'm guilty of it all the time with my kids. Like, and this is why they come to me to solve their problems because I'm always there trying to solve their problems. So now I'm consciously trying to step away and not, especially because I'm reading all the things about middle school and all this. And they have to, Jen and I both have middle schoolers and like, mine's going into middle school this year. I think yours is going into middle school this year too, right? And yeah, so like
middle school's the worst. But anyway, sorry, you'll survive. You'll live through it.
But it's terrible.
But like part of all these things I'm reading is like you need to step back. You need to let them solve the problem themselves. And up until this point, like you're very much hands-on helping them solve the problem. And so I think that's probably why like it's an instinct of ours to like, okay, I'll help solve the problem.
But there's an expediency when you're a working mom and you've got to get those kids out the door to before school care or to their event or whatever it is that you don't have the time, right? So I fell into that trap a lot, doing things that I should have probably not done because we just didn't have the time, right? Like I will tie your shoes for you until you're 10 because we need to get the hell out the door, right? Like you can't, not that I did tie my kids' shoes, so they were 10, but I'm just saying like you'll do stuff that you shouldn't because you don't have the time.
Hey, Krista, I'm still tying my kids' shoes.
Yeah, you just gotta like cut yourself a break on that too. Like there were times where I was doing stuff for my kids that I darn well knew that I should let them figure it out on their own. And I was like, got it, but I don't have the time for that. Like we got to keep moving forward. And I would take yourself a break on that too. To your point though, you want to try to let them solve those problems so that they're not unable to solve a problem. But it is hard when you have limited time. That's the thing.
Yeah, although the shoe thing is a problem. When I see their shoes get untied during a game and I'm like, oh no. Like, how is this going to get solved right now? Because you are too old to have the referee come over and tie your shoes for you.
I've seen it happen though. I've actually seen a referee tie a girl's tie.
Oh
because they were on title game. It was frustrated him, and he just kneeled down and tied her shoes for her. So
we've had this conversation in my house like this weekend. We're like, you're gonna go to gym class. Who is going to tie your sneakers? Like,
well, and I mean, my younger daughter, is so successful and so on top of everything. But at a point in time when she was younger, it was, forgetting her lunch or forgetting her gym uniform or forgetting her uniform. And I always felt like I was like, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm at work and I'm not coming home to take care of it. Little did I find out years later that my husband was largely running that stuff to school for her. So at some point she stopped even asking me for help because she knew I wasn't going to help, but then she knew she could ask her dad.
Well, she's resourceful.
He was closer and he felt bad. So, but at least she learned to work her resources. Like she understood which was the resource that was going to help her, which was the resource that was not going.
Well, but I think it is so important too for kids to learn how to advocate for themselves and to realize the situations in which they do need to advocate for themselves. Yeah. And I know, Krista, that your kids were big into sports. Your one daughter played D1, and my daughter played in a summer league this year where everyone was supposed to, a basketball league where everyone was supposed to get equal playing time. And she was not getting equal playing time. And she was on the bench. And she was the youngest. She was a year younger than everyone else on the team. And said, Mom, will you say something to coach? I said, no, you can either talk to the coach and say, why am I not getting the playing time? What do I need to do to improve on to get out on the court? Or you can sit there and ride out the rest of the season. Like those are your options.
Right.
It's come to the time where if the coach was being inappropriate, if he was doing something that an adult needed to step in, then that's a different story. But when it's just about playing time, now, it's up to you. It's up to you to use your voice, and I just, it's a huge lesson that we're working on in our house too, is, mom's not going to be there to step in every time you need something. I can help you walk through and, come to me with what this is the problem. Let's talk about what we're going to do, but it's time for you to do it on your own.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I don't have sons, so I can't speak to that, but I can say for girls, team sports is such a great place to learn a series of life lessons, like just to see, the way a mini microcosm of what the work world is going to be like is what the field is like when they're in, middle school and high school. And, all those life lessons, all those things about working on a team that they can learn from team sports, whether they play at a, rec level or a travel level or the D1 level, whatever that is, like the amount of life lessons that my kids learned through sports were tremendous. And I don't know what would have happened had they not had those opportunities. So I don't think you have to be the most outstanding athlete on the team to play. But maybe your daughter is the best person on the team who isn't get playing time. Maybe she's the worst person on the team who isn't getting playing time. But like to have that conversation with her coach of like, why am I not getting playing time? What is it I need to do to get better? And then to put the effort into getting better, if that's what she chooses to do, is an amazing experience. That's a lesson she'll carry for the rest of her life. So yes. I've said to a lot of people, get your girls in team sports, and they don't have to play up to college. My daughter played for a semester in college and then decided to stop. And that was the best decision for her, because when you're playing in college at any level, but particularly the D1 level, it is a job. And that wasn't what she was looking for to do in college. So I was glad when she chose not to play anymore. But all the way up through high school, all of the lessons that she got from team sports, you couldn't get it any other way. So I'm so glad she did it.
Yeah, it's like a conversation like we were just having the other day, because both my girls are in team sports, but up to this point they take the approach, well, I've been playing for X amount of years, therefore I'm good. I was like, well, it doesn't really work like that. Like, like it does to at the very beginning, like, but now like there's a kid who can pick it up yesterday and they just might put the time in it, and they might have the ability, or they've put in a lot of work or whatever it is, and they're going to far surpass you. So I keep having the conversation. I'm like, you have to do a little bit more than just the bare minimum. Now you can't just go to practice and just expect playing time. When you're at practice, you have to try really, really hard to show yourself, and then you have to practice outside of practice. Yeah. And they're not seeing it yet. I'm like, well, you might see it when you're on the bench. You might see it then when, there's no guarantee for playing time. Just because, I've been playing this sport since I was in kindergarten. I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. That's another life lesson as well, right? Like you can be doing it's time. reps are important, right? Like getting the reps in on something helps you. It's that 10,000 hours concept that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, right? That's important, but there's also like an extra effort component to it. And then there's a talent component to it. Like, if your child who wants to play basketball is going to top out at 5'2", they're going to probably have a rougher time than somebody who's going to be 5'10" or 6 foot, right? And that's just one of those things too. There's a talent, an innate talent and an innate ability thing that maybe you can't control, right? That has to do with size or just skill or whatever it might be. But that's a lesson too. Not everybody is going to be, the number one at everything they do, but there's an important place on the team for every player.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same way at work. Not everybody needs to be up here. Everybody just needs to work towards getting the job done as a collective. And that's what a team is, right? Team at work or team on the field, whatever it may be.
Yeah, like we talk about a lot, like in law firms, you have people who are kind of take on different roles. You're going to have those attorneys who are they're the worker bees. They're going to put their head down and they're going to just work on the file. And then there's others that are interested in marketing, and everyone and both are good. You need them both. And it's also good not to try to put someone in a place that they don't want to be at. Don't put someone who just wants to put their head down and go crazy into the case and be creative there and put them in a marketing role when that's just not their place. Don't make someone marketing who doesn't want to do it.
Well, and the thing too in law firms, like you have people who the research and the writing and all that, right? Such an important part of the overall firm. And then they're the trial attorneys.
Yeah.
If you tried to take that person who's like that research and writing person and put them in front of a jury, that might not be the best thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to find what suits you and what you like. And there was an expression that I think people in my age group were saying to our kids that was misplaced. We used to say, find what you love and make it your job. And I think that created a whole lot of kids who think that they should be like, so happy to go to work every day. Like, oh my God, I love this. I think what we should have said to our kids is find something to love about your job. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there are plenty of things about the claim business that I do not love. There are plenty of things that I do that I don't love. And that is largely why they call it work and they pay us, because I do the stuff I don't love to do because I'm getting paid to do that. The stuff I love to do, I might do for free, right? Because I really like it. Like, it's fun. But the whole point of work is some of it's not going to be all that fun, but they are going to pay you and you get the health benefits and all that stuff. And, but find something to love about your job, right? I love, like we talked about, I love the puzzle. I love to negotiate. I love a lot of aspects of claims, and that's what makes it a good job for me. But do I love every minute of every day? No, I do not. I do not. Yeah. But that's okay too. So I think, encourage your staff, your kids, your neighbors, or your friends, like find something to love about that job. Don't try to make your love a job. Maybe people who are authors do that. I don't know. Like, how many people really have their passion is what they make their livelihood on? I don't know that that's always the same thing.
No. And even that, I think it still becomes a chore. It can, because like, oh, I have to do this, So then even though it's something you love, it still becomes a job. So yeah. Well, this is of no surprise that we quickly ran out of time.
We can talk for another 2 hours. And
I know.
The best parts. If you like.
Yeah, we might need a part 2, life lessons with Krista.
Sure. That's awful.
But before we close up, Krista, you have had such an amazing career. But what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
I would say probably try not to get so amped up about things all the time. Like, I'm a very passionate person. Like, I'm very passionate about my job and about my life and sometimes passion can get you spun up where you don't need to. So I would say, I wouldn't want to say to myself, calm down, because I think having energy and passion is important. And I have a lot of energy and a lot of passion. But I would definitely look back at some things and think now, why was I so worked up about that? Maybe didn't need to take that one so far down the line. I would say kind of be better about that. We talked about it earlier. I didn't pick my head up for a while. I don't know that I'd go back and tell myself to pick my head up, because I just don't think I had the capacity to do that. So I'm comfortable with those decisions. I would just say probably that, just like know that, you know, it's a long career and like you can't get yourself overwrought all the time every day. That I spent some time doing early in my career. I probably didn't need to. Like the whole, it's not fair. It's not fair. Why is that person getting promoted? Why am I not getting promoted? It's not fair.
I hate,
you know, but that's just kind of the time.
It's natural, but like, yeah. I have that conversation with my kids all the time. I'm like, well, it's not that it's not fair. You're just unhappy with what's happening, but it's not a fairness.
Yeah. Yeah. It just is what it is. So maybe that would be my advice, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
And for everyone who's listening, of course, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also find us on YouTube at Claims Never Sleep Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep Podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.